Okay, so what I want to do in this video is basically I want to talk a little bit about styled components and how I'm using them on the Level Up tutorial site. So just a little insight into some of the stuff I'm building here. I mentioned on Twitter that I had built this and was wondering if anyone would be interested, and there seemed to be a lot of people who wanted to see how I'm using styled components. Now, two things. I'm sick, so if you can hear it in my voice, yeah, that's why I sound like this. If you can't hear it, then that's cool. I will not be sick into the microphone, I promise, because that's a huge pet peeve of mine. But number two, this is not going to be a why or why not use style components. I don't want to get any sort of arguments. There will be a time and a place for the pros and cons of styled components. This is just a how I'm using it, right? So what we want to do here is I want to talk about how I decided to use style components and what I'm doing with them and what I'm not doing with them in this particular instance. First thing I should point out is that the majority of the site, as in 99% of the CSS written in the site, is not written as styled components. They are written as standard stylus CSS and then converted using the Meteor build tool, ISOPAC. So that said, the majority of the site is not running on styled components, but this should highlight a nice thing about styled components is that you can just start using them in your project and slowly convert things over as need be or not, depending on what your level of interest in it is. But if you want to get started and try it out, it's as simple as just installing the package, npm install styled-components, yarn, add styled components, whatever you like to do. But basically, let's take a look at why styled components work and why they're nice. The component in particular in question here is the search bar. You can see selected, we get that little underline, and I can start typing, and it filters as I type. Now, the filter is a very, very basic filter. Since I only have a handful of data points, it's just a standard JavaScript filter. I'll show you that in a second. Now, another thing, we'll go over an example of using style components with this pro exclusive little badge here I'm putting on. So first thing I'm going to do is going to show you how I use styled components to do this filtered series search bar, and then I'm going to then make styled components directly in this pro exclusive so you can see a creation of it in a simple example. Okay, so let's get started. Let's head to the filter series, and basically let's check it out. In playlists, I'm just importing this search bar. Now, the search bar is the component in general, right? It contains a div that has the input, it contains the icon, which is the magnifying glass, and it contains the underline, right? Which I'm doing as an absolutely positioned div that I'm just increasing in width. So because of that, I have just two properties on this thing. It's essentially just what happens on change. On change, it's just setting the state of the search value, and then I'm using that state down here in a filter. Now, you might be thinking this is unsustainable for a large amount of queries, and it probably is, but I have like, I don't know, 40 tutorial series. So using this kind of JavaScript filter on that is no big deal. I'm not hitting the database at all. Everything's already pulled in. In addition, I'm passing in the value. Okay, so let's head to the search bar itself, and you'll instantly see some styled component stuff. Now, keep in mind, this CSS may seem overly complex for what it's doing. It may not. It's no big deal. I'll tell you about it in a second. But let's scroll down to actually check out the actual component, which is a search bar. Now, our search bar has a few props. It has a theme where I can use it on a light or dark background. By default, it's the light background. It has a placeholder, so I can change the placeholder on the input. It just basically sets it down here. The value comes in as a props. The onChange is a function, okay? I should actually have a theme right here in my prop types. Let's add that. Theme prop types dot string. Okay. Cool, so as you can see here, this component takes 4 props, no big deal. And I simply just have my icon component, which is accepting a name and a color. So based on the theme, the icon's either going to be white, 100% white, or 100% black. You can see that here. This is the default light theme, so the icon is black. But really, this composition is just, we have a wrapper, which is a div, we have an icon, we have an input, and then we have another div that serves as the underline. Notice how I am using a class name still, even though I'm using styled components. Now, this may or may not be a good practice. I haven't really decided yet. I'm still sort of experimenting with styled components here. So by no means take this as the end all be all, but you can see how that's being used in action. Now, what we want here is basically, I want this whole thing to be contained, right? I want to be able to drop it anywhere, and I want to have those styles go with it, and I don't want to have these styles be affected anywhere else. Now, obviously, the class name here is potentially an issue with that, right? Because, yeah, this still gets output with a class of underline. However, it is encapsulated here under this other class, this DSWIHO. So, you know, it is encapsulated here, so we'll have to see. I guess that isn't necessarily a major concern at this point. Like I said, it's still learning. But as we can see here, we have a search wrapper, okay? And you might be wondering, well, where is the search wrapper component? And this is really the sort of beauty for styled components for me, because you don't have to go through the whole create a function to create a wrapper component. If we head up top here, we can see the syntax is really super simple. We're just defining a variable. A constant search wrapper is equal to, and then we get to use this styled object here, and we get to use this div property, which is actually a function, I believe. Now, then we're calling these backticks, and everything inside of the backticks is a just standard CSS. You'll notice instead of camel case CSS like you're used to in React, we have a standard CSS syntax, which again is something that I really like about this. So this is where we're defining what search wrapper is. We're saying search wrapper is essentially just a div, and here are its properties. It has a margin of this, it has a display of flex, it has a border bottom of this purple color, and it has position relative. Now I can say any SVG inside of search wrapper is going to have a position relative top of 4, and we're going to have an input. We're going to say any input inside of search wrapper is going to have a border none, all this sort of stuff. Now check this out. This is the most interesting line here of anything. I'm pretty much saying to have access to the props, right? I want to have access to the theme here. I'm saying $ brackets, so we're using some string interpolation. Then we have to use an arrow function to have access to the props. But at that point, I have access to props, and I'm using props.theme. So I'm using then a ternary operator to say if the theme is dark, then I want the color to be white. Now, typically my input colors are all, I think, a dark purple, and that's what I would want them to be if the theme is light. So as you can see here, this color override is only happening with this particular theme. Now, there is theming things within styled components where you can set up various themes, right? However, this is just such a basic example. I'm just overriding one property. It makes sense here that I can use props just like this instead of having to do anything additional. But as you can see, we also get access to the ampersand like we would in Sass, which is another great thing about styled components here. So we can say ampersand focus, which, as you know from Sass or Stylus, is basically if the input, as in the parent, is now focused, then we can say outline none. And then we can say if the parent is in focus and it's next to an underline, then we want that underline to scale to 1, because right now the underline is scaled to 0 by default. The underline is simply just a rectangle that is 4 pixels tall, 100 pixels wide, and being scaled down to nothing. Then when you hover onto it, it scales up and animates on. So as you can see here, this is just some basic CSS, but this encapsulates this and it sticks with it. Now, that's not to say you want to use styled components everywhere, although there is a lot of great reasons to do so. This goes to show you that you can really just encapsulate this sort of stuff into one component. I'm never essentially outside of this. This is the only thing that's going to look like this for me, so this sort of is now encompassed in that. And likewise, even though I defined a class with this underline, we saw earlier that it is underneath the parent, right? So all these styles are still scoped underneath the parent, and if I use a dot underline somewhere else, it's not going to be affected. Okay? So now that we have that knowledge, right, you can see the search wrapper is a little bit more declarative than just a div. We don't have to have a class name on it. It generates all that for us. Super nice. We don't have to worry about going to a separate file. Everything's nice in here. And in all, it's not too cluttered. So let's talk about this next one we want to do, which is this Pro Exclusive badge. So I have this Pro Exclusive badge right here, and I want to give this some styles. Particularly, go pop over to Figma. This is what I have it looking like right now. I sort of want to make people give me have a lot of questions about what's included in Pro packages and what's not. So I want to make this look very obvious which series are included in the Pro package. So I'm going to have this little badge. So you can see I've created a component here in Figma. This is what I want it to look like. And let's go ahead and get started with styling this component. You can see I already have the HTML for it in place. And now that you can sort of see what we're building towards, I'm going to close Figma because my CPU is already running really high. I'm doing this on my laptop, which I don't typically do, which is in need of an upgrade. So it's definitely not super happy right now while I'm recording. But let's go ahead back into our code here. You'll see first thing we got to do is just import styled from styled components, which under Pro badge, I've already done. Okay. Next thing we want to do is we want to declare a constant variable. Notice I already have a div here, right? This is why this becomes nice, because instead of having to do div class name, assign it a class name, come to your CSS, write a class name, we can just define everything here in a way that makes more sense. So we say constant, and we can say, I'll say badge, okay? Because that's sort of going to define what this wrapper is. Constant badge is equal to, and then we can say styled dot, and it's going to be a div, and then we're going to have two backticks, just like this. Okay, and at this point, we don't really have to do a whole lot, but if you check our search bar one, you see we just start adding styles. So for instance, I could say color, and I want the color to be this purple, so I can grab this. Now you could have this hex value be a variable somewhere. I'm going to be doing that eventually. This is only my second one though, so I haven't set up a system yet. And then next thing we want is we want this teal color, which I'm using down here, to actually be the background. Now notice how this isn't a JavaScript object. There's no commas at the end of the lines here. That was actually really tough for me because you get used to writing styles in React. You're putting commas everywhere. These need semicolons because this is essentially just one big string here. Okay, so let's save this. And just like that, we can replace these divs with the word badge. Okay, because this is a component. Even though it's essentially just this bit of code, we've just built a component, and now we can say the badge has an icon and the word Pro Exclusive. Now we'll also want to do maybe like a font size, and the font size will be, or not font size, I want to do font weight. Font weight 900. And we'll also have a border radius of 5. Now it depends on how you have things set up, but you can also get some sweet auto prefixing going on for you as well. So you don't have to worry about that stuff either. And let's head back to our doc. We can see, like I said, my CPU is absolutely drilled right now because of this screen recording. Okay, and as you can see, things have worked out nicely here. Without having to do very much, we now have this badge here. It's not perfect, obviously, because we're still sort of figuring out what needs to be done. But if you inspect it, you can see it's been giving some classes to this thing. Now, what's cool about this is that this is totally classes you'll never have to worry about actually writing. It's total nonsense. And the best part about that is you won't ever have to worry about overriding accidental CSS, that sort of stuff. It definitely encapsulates everything into this little badge here. So for instance, we want to, last thing, we'll probably want to have this be position absolute, or it's going to make it in the top, I don't know, 5 pixels from the top. I wasn't expecting it to go up when I said top 5 pixels. That's because I guess I don't have a position relative on the playlist single, so I'll have a position relative. Okay, so obviously this is looking a little bit better. I'm going to clean this off screen before it goes live, obviously, because this doesn't look like what I have in my mock. As you can see here, we're basically just encompassing our styles within this thing, and we don't have to worry about those styles leaking out And it's as simple as this. So if you say, I don't want to add another thing to make styling more complicated, well, the only thing here is that I want to put these vars here, but man, these few lines of code here aren't adding that much weight. And if you're looking at this, you know, honestly, a div with the class name of badge or whatever is a lot less easier to read than the word badge here. Like I said, I'm not trying to start any styled components versus not. This is only my second styled component in this whole site, so I can't necessarily speak on if it's like a great idea yet. It seems pretty cool though. But I figured it'd be nice to just sort of see how people are using it, right? So search bar, here it is. It's a little bit more complex example where I'm nesting and referencing elements and even classes within a search bar within a single component. And here this one is way more simple. I have nothing going on in here, nothing extra, and it works really well. Cool. So I'm going to keep working on this. I'm going to finish up the extra styles here, add some padding, position it correctly, add position relative to the wrapper, and you should probably see this badge up on the site later on if you are not a pro subscriber. So check it out. This is styled components. This is just a quick vlog, you could say, on how I'm doing them in my site. And if you have any thoughts or ideas on maybe things that you didn't like that I was doing, or things that you liked or whatever, post a comment below. Let me know what you're thinking. I want to hear your thoughts on styled components and inside of React. Now, this is a fiery topic, so like I said, if you're going to start arguing about it, please be respectful. I know people tend to get really fired up about inline styles versus, you know, standard styles and whatever. So as always, this is Scott with Level Up Tutorials. If you want to help support the creation of these free videos, head to leveluptutorials.com/store, or just leveluptutorials.com, head to the header and check store. And there are a ton of series there for purchase, or you can become a pro subscriber so you won't have to see these fancy pro exclusive badges I'm about to put on these series that are for pros exclusively. So check it out. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.